Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam, and today I want to share a really big insight that arose during meditation this week. It's one of those really big ones, one of those whales that you catch every now and then, and I wanted to share it with you while it's fresh in my mind. And I also want to share a little bit some of the elements that made it come about. The essence of the insight has to do with how our mind is possessed by an idea, and the idea is that of the acquisition of happiness in the future. Now, it's interesting to analyze just how driven we are by this notion. It's a very intrinsic, hidden notion that somewhere else at a different time and place in the future, if we do the right things, our life is going to feel fundamentally different, and we're going to get what we want, type of thing, right? So this promise of future happiness. And it's patently obvious that both the notions of future and happiness are completely conceptual in nature. There's nothing real about them. The idea or the concept of the future is probably the easiest to debunk, because as you may have noticed, regardless of how many times you have projected future scenarios or projected a future in which you find yourself, the now, the present moment, has the rather stubborn quality of always just being there. In other words, no matter how many futures we've projected, we always find ourselves, between brackets, stuck in the now. It just doesn't go away. So whenever future scenarios arrive, whether they're the ones that we wanted or not, they always stubbornly feel like they're happening now. And with that now comes also a sense of self that makes it so that whatever experience we go through, we, as the individual self that we believe ourselves to be, always feel the same. We are always the same self going through experiences, whether they're good or bad, whether they feel happy or unhappy. And it reminds me, actually, since we're speaking on the notion of happiness, of how scared I had been in the past about succeeding for fear of not being able to enjoy it. In other words, one worry that we might have in the back of our minds is, I'm not going to get what I want. But the worry that I had in the back of my mind was, what if I get what I want and I can't enjoy it? What if it just feels the same way everything else does, which is, it feels like something is just not quite right. Something is out of place, right? So the notion of the future is a notion. It's a conceptual notion. It doesn't really exist. There's only ever the now. And the notion of happiness is also extremely vague, usually associated with feelings of safety, dopamine hits, validation, gratification, fulfillment, perhaps, those kind of things. But more often than not associated with emotions that come and go, rather than any sort of permanent peace and joy. So happiness, a very flimsy and ephemeral concept, or ephemeral states of mind that we try to preserve in place and call that happiness, is in itself also a concept. Now, you have the concept of future, you have the concept of happiness, you bundle them together, and all of a sudden you have the notion or the idea of future happiness, which is just an idea, really. But if your mind has been entrained to buy into it, it makes it into something real. And from there, then onwards, it can become an orienting principle or a master that you serve. And in fact, you begin to sacrifice the here and the now, and you begin to sacrifice your peace of mind in honor of a notion or an idea of this future happiness, which, as we said, it really is just a notion, it's just an idea. Now, it's important, I think, to share how this came about, because it happened literally just last night. And it became very, very clear that this was the case, that I have been possessed, and that we collectively are possessed by the pursuit of future happiness, by the idea of pursuing future happiness. I am sure that what I'm about to mention is just the final big dominoes in a series of practices and growth that had led up to this insight. But I think they're worth mentioning nevertheless, in case they help you resonate with this. One of them was, I was watching the movie Inception this week. If you haven't watched it, it's a great movie. It's about people who go into other people's dreams to either extract information or plant ideas. That's what Inception is called, to plant an idea in somebody's mind. And in the movie, or rather in the opening scene of the movie, Leo DiCaprio, who's the lead actor, goes into this explanation about how the most contagious thing in the world is an idea, and how once an idea grabs hold of the mind, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to let's say empty it out or clear it out, or make the mind free from that notion once it has really taken hold, when it has really been adopted. And in that sense, you could say that mind is now possessed by the idea, right? The idea, the mind is not holding the idea, is the idea that now has co-opted that mind. I don't know who said it, but it's a famous quote, if you want to look it up at some point, that says that the mind doesn't hold ideas, but ideas hold the mind, right? That's an interesting thing to consider there. So I was watching Inception, and I was processing what that meant. Okay, so an idea is something that is highly contagious, and once it grabs hold of the mind, it kind of holds it hostage. The mind has now been co-opted by the idea. And then last night, I was talking with a good friend of mine, a friend with whom we exchange always very deep ideas, and we explore together all these concepts. And we were talking about freedom, and the fact that we're both, doing a bit of experimentation with crypto. His far more aggressive than mine. And he said, where would you be if you had all the money in the world? It's a classic question that we tend to ask ourselves. What would I be doing if money was not an issue, right? And he said, what would you be doing? He knows that I enjoy painting, for example, that I enjoy coaching, that I enjoy traveling, right? So would you rather not be doing all those things? And I said to him, well, it seems to me, consider that I'm semi-financially independent, that maybe I'm already always doing what I want. And of course, it takes certain other things into consideration, not only money, but it seems to me like we're always ever doing what we want. And another thought came to mind, which was this notion of that freedom is contingent on financial freedom, that your fundamental freedom comes from being financially free. And I said to him, well, I would challenge that notion, right? Let's, for the sake of conversation, challenge the notion that being financially free means that you are fundamentally free. And he said to me, well, isn't it obvious that freedom is your ability to do the things that you enjoy? You know, that if you like traveling or painting or, helping startups or whatever, that doing what you want is what freedom is all about. And I said to him, no, it isn't obvious at all because, things like free time, things like hobbies, things like enjoyment are concepts that are fairly new. And even the notion of freedom is a notion that is fairly new. In the past, people would not orient their minds about, if only I had all the money in the world, I would enjoy myself. There was maybe only survival, or there was maybe the notion that being responsible and keeping a 9-to-5 job for 40 years was what being a real man or manning up or was all about. And so if you dial the clock back, you notice that our values and our orientations have changed, and therefore our current notion of freedom to do what you want when you want, especially hobbies and recreational or edifying things, might be fairly modern, and therefore it's a concept. So my point to my friend was, I'm not going to so much challenge your concept of freedom and whether it's true or not, but have you considered where it came from? Did you come up with it? Or did you imbibe it from the social narrative and are now completely oriented towards becoming financially free because you believe that that will give you the freedom that you want, without ever having questioned where the idea came from, right? And is it not the case that if you are not beholden to the idea that money buys freedom, if you are free from that idea, that whether you have money or not, you are already doing whatever you want, right? That it's only when you buy into the idea that money buys freedom that the question, what would I be doing if I had all the money in the world, becomes a question in the first place, right? Now, this is now going, of course, into, philosophy of life type of territory, if you will. But I think it's of supreme importance because whatever our mind is oriented towards, whatever the pickle of life it is that we're trying to resolve, which says, if only you sorted me out, you'd be happy, or you'd be able to get on with it, or you would get to that future happy scenario. That's the idea that you're possessed by. That's the idea that you are owned by. That's the idea that has co-opted our minds. And that's the very idea that we want to be liberated from. So when we are possessed by, once again, the same example, when we are possessed by the idea of money buys freedom, we are now held hostage or possessed, as I said, by that idea, and we are no longer free already by definition. We have been co-opted by the idea. Whilst that idea has co-opted our mind, the only way that we think we can be free is to make money, and we will orient all our efforts towards that. But liberation of the mind and the kind of self-cultivation that we're talking about usually in this channel is one in which we are able to free ourselves not from our financial shackles, but from the idea that those shackles make us fundamentally not free. From the idea that it's breaking the financial shackles that'll give us this fundamental freedom and fulfillment. As the caveat that I always make, that doesn't mean that you should not pursue financial goals or put in the effort to be in a financially solid place. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. It is just to say that don't confuse a practicality with something fundamental. Things that are necessary in the lower brackets of the Maslow pyramid of human needs don't work well for you in the upper ones. Practicalities cannot fundamentally fulfill, at least not in the way that we expect them to, right? Of course, once it's all integrated, you come to realize that even the practical is holy and sacred and the rest of that good stuff. But before that is the case, we want to get our practicalities in order, and at the same time try to separate the milk from the water, as the holy swan Hamsa does. It only, it drinks a mixture of milk and water, but it has the ability to only drink the milk, right? So we want to be able to, in pursuing a practicality, not confuse it with something that will give us a fundamental happiness or freedom, and see if we can navigate that territory in such a way. Now, the moment you question the validity, or rather you can question an idea on the level of, is it true, is it valid? But you want to also question, how and why did I adopt it? That's even more fundamental. And if you start to question how you adopted an idea, you come to realize it was never really yours. You come to realize that you very likely didn't adopt it by choice. And then you start questioning why you are orienting your life in the service of that idea, if it isn't really yours. It appears to be yours, that's for sure. And it has great logical reasons to do so. It'll say like, well, are you telling me that doing the things you like is not freedom, right? That sounds very idiotic. And what I'm saying is, where the need for that idea in the first place, and what is the origin of it? And if you challenge that, you come to realize the idea is, number one, just an idea, just a concept, and number two, not yours. It's adopted, and it's now serving a kind of parasitic role in the mind and using the mind for its purposes, as opposed to, whatever you'd be doing if that idea had not been adopted in the first place, right? That is a very scary exploration, as a matter of fact, right? When we start to really undermine the very basis of our worldview, things can become rather uncomfortable and squirrely. But that's part of the task, right? Is to really have a go at this, and to kill your darlings in that sense. And some darlings are not even known to us. They drive us behind the scenes. And when we're doing shadow work or exploring and clearing out trauma or emotions, it's important to ask, what is the idea that makes this emotion feel valid and important? The emotion is giving you a sense of loss or danger, and is coupled to an idea that validates that scenario or that danger as being real, right? So the emotion gives the scenario its bite, but the idea gives the scenario its reality or its validity. And they work hand in hand, and we can challenge them equally, so that we can be liberated from ideas and not co-opted by them. So that's today's video. I was very keen on sharing this. As I said, to me, it was a very big one yesterday evening. As ever, I'm curious to hear what you guys make of the topic, and if you can relate to this notion. And also, as always, if you think that this content benefits others and is worth subscribing to, then sharing and subscribing is highly recommended. Thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for watching thus far. I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. Enjoy the weekend. Cheerio.